Hello students. In our previous class, we have studied how we can enter data in a form and how that data will be taken up by a PHP code for processing. But the drawback of this is we cannot save the data. The data that we have entered is not saved anywhere. So that we can save this data and use it next time also, we have to store this data in a database. Students, we have already learnt in our 11th standard using PostgreSQL how to create a database, how to create a table and how to insert the records. We will be using PostgreSQL here also. In today's class, we are basically going to create a database and we are going to connect this database in our PHP code. So let us quickly have a look at the program. Okay, before starting with this program, students, we have already created a database in our PostgreSQL. Inside that database, we have also created a table. So let us see how we are going to connect to that database. So let us start with the first statement. The first statement, as always, is doctype HTML. Then we have a head. Here we have used an attribute lang is equals to en. We've provided a title for the page. We have used a meta tag for search engine optimization. After that, we close our head tag and then we start with the body tag. Inside the body tag, we have a heading and then we have created a form. For creating a form, we have used form and method used here is post. Inside the form, we have a label, that's this first name. For accepting the input for name, we have a text box, input type equal to text, name is equals to name, and we've provided a few more attributes like ID, max length, required, and placeholder. We've added a BR for new line. After that, we have one more label for gender. For label, for specifying the gender, we have used radio buttons. Input type is equals to radio, name equal to gender, ID and value. Then after that we have written the actual text which is going to be printed. Similarly, we have created two more radio buttons. Over here, please remember that the name attribute of all the three radio buttons is going to be same. That is name equal to gender, name equal to gender and name equal to gender. Value will be the value that we want to store in the database. If the person selects male, then the value M will be stored in the database. Similarly, if the user selects female, then the value F will be stored in the database. Then we have added a BR for new line. Lastly, we have input type equal to submit, name equal to submit, ID and a value. We close the form, we close the body, we close the HTML. After that, we have written our PHP code. We can write PHP code within the body also, we can write it afterwards also, or we can create a separate file also. We have seen all the three methods. Over here, we have just written after our HTML code. We have angle bracket question mark PHP indicating beginning of PHP script. Here we have created a variable $server name. This is very important. The value for this server name is written as PGSQL. PGSQL because we are using PostgreSQL. Colon. Then the host that we are using is localhost. Hence we write host equal to localhost. A semicolon. After that, DB name. DB name stands for database name. The database that is created has name student. So this is our first variable. The second variable is username. Username is equals to Postgres. Now these values are basically going to depend on what values you have for your PostgreSQL. Next variable we have is $password. This is the password of your Postgres. So you have to specify the username and password that is in your own machine. Next, we use another variable $CONN as in connection. Now this statement is basically going to establish our connection with the database. So let's understand this statement. We have written a variable name equal to new. New is because we are creating a new connection. Then we write PDO. PDO is a method or it is a class which is going to be used for connecting to our database. So here we have to use three values. First one, server name. So this is the same variable that we have created here. The value is going to be passed, comma, username. The second one is username. The third one is the third value, that is password. So let's understand this statement one more time. We create a variable with $CONN and we write new PDO for creating a new connection with the database. For creating a connection, we need three values. The first one is server name, the second one is username, and the third one is password. If all these three values are correct, then a connection with the database is going to be established. We are now connected to our database. After that, we are going to check if is set $post submit. This statement means if the person has clicked on the submit button, then perform the following task. If not, then do nothing. So let's see what statements are written. Here we have a variable $name. $post is equals to name. This is the same value which is coming from the form because the form has name, and we have used post method. Like we have studied in our previous class, $post is a super global and name is going to be the name of the text box. So we will get the value name. Second, $gender is a new variable for storing gender. $post in double quotes, we write gender, that is name of the radio button. If the user is selecting the second one, that is, if the user is selecting female, then the value F will be stored in the variable $gender. So once we get the values, then we can write our SQL statement. $SQL is equals to insert into info. Info is the table name and gender. These are the column names. Values. For values, we are using $name and $gender. So this is a simple table where we just have a name and a gender. And this command we have already studied in our 11th standard. For inserting any values in the table, we have to use insert into. After we have our SQL command, then we write SQL con, use the symbol minus sign and angle bracket and EXEU. EXEU stands for execute. Execute the SQL. SQL means this variable, the SQL statement that we have created. If this statement is correctly executed, we will get a message, echo, a new record is saved. So this is how we can store in the database. Firstly, we are connecting to the database. We are getting the values from the form. We are writing the SQL statement and executing the SQL statement. Let us all have a look how it is going to look in the browser. So this is our browser. We have started our XAMPP server. We have opened our directory and let's just open the file. So we click here. Let us write a name as AA. We will select female and when we click on submit, it is going to execute the PHP code and we get a message as new record saved successfully. For finding out if the record is saved or not, let us come to our PostgreSQL. Okay, so this is our Postgres. Let's connect to our database. We will write /c. The database name is student. So we are connected to the student. We want to see all the records in our table. So for seeing the records, we write select star from, the name of the table was info, and enter. So these are the records which were saved earlier. Right now we have saved the last record, that is AA, and we have selected female, and thus it is storing F. So this is how your database, so this is how we can connect to database using PHP. This was the assignment where we have seen how we can store our values. In the next class, we are going to see how we can read the values from the database and display it on our page. Let us also understand the textual content for this. Database connectivity. PHP data object class. This is PDO. Right now in the program we have seen we have used PDO. PDO is a class which is going to help us to connect to our database. So this PDO helps us to connect PHP code with almost any database server. When we say any database server, it means it can be PostgreSQL, it can be MySQL, it can be Oracle, or any database that you can work on. It doesn't account for database specific syntax, and one can switch database simply by switching the connection string in many instances. This means that if I change the database name, or if I change entirely from PLSQL, from PostgreSQL to MySQL, all I need to do is I have to change the connection. So once I've changed the connection, I can work with any other database also. It provides database access layer, providing a uniform method for accessing multiple databases. This means uniformly we can access different databases. At a time, we can access one or more database also. Create database connection object. We have already seen how we can create a connection object. Let us look one more time. So the statement over here, $con equal to new PDO server name, username, password. This statement is going to create a new database connection. The $con, it is just a variable, it can be any name. With 3 parameters. Now it has 3 different parameters. That means 3 values are required. The first one is server host name or an IP address. If you do not know the host name, in that case, you can use the IP address and database name. So the first variable, if you all remember, it was using localhost and database as student. Second, database username. So the username in our case was Postgres. The third one is database password. We had also provided a password which was used for Postgres, admin123. It will depend on your machine what password you have saved. SQL statement and its execution. Once we have connected to a database, then we have to write an SQL statement and execute it. So here, the statement, if you will observe, insert into student name, gender, values, name and gender. This is the SQL statement which we have to execute. This statement will insert values in the table. For executing the statement, we use $con execute SQL. So here it is going to execute the SQL statement. So here again we have the same program for your references. You can observe one more time. This statement is going to connect. After we get the values for name and gender, we are going to write an SQL query. Once we have the SQL query, we are going to execute the SQL query. So this is all that we have to see today. We have seen how we can store values in the database. In our next class, we will see how we can get the values from the database. Thank you, students.